In the stillness of an early autumn evening, St. Mary's Hospital seemed like any other place of healing. But Sarah, a dedicated nurse who had walked these halls for years, felt a chill she couldn't ignore. Her usual night shift had a strange tension that hung in the air, thick and unsettling. The town, though familiar, seemed to harbor an undercurrent of mystery as more patients flooded the hospital, displaying symptoms no one could explain. Their skin turned a grayish hue, their eyes distant and blank, as if looking into a world only they could see. Each movement they made seemed out of place and eerily hollow. And hey, if this story has you on edge, don't forget to subscribe for more. As days passed, Sarah noticed the infection spreading faster than they could manage. At first, doctors thought it was a rare virus. Yet, within mere hours, the hospital was filled with people showing high fevers, intense shaking, and strange states of consciousness, halfway between life and death. Every night seemed darker, as the patients grew more restless. If you're as intrigued as Sarah is about what's happening here, hit that like button. Sarah found a quiet moment with Mark, her longtime friend and paramedic, who shared her worries. His face was pale under the dim hospital lights as he muttered, "Sarah, this isn't normal. It's almost like they're not even alive." Sarah shivered. "I know, Mark. And it's spreading. Each day we lose more, and there's no end in sight." "I don't understand." By the third evening, a sudden blackout struck the hospital. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie shadows through the corridors. Sarah's heart raced as the silence pressed in, broken only by faint groans echoing through the hospital. It felt like she had stepped into another reality, where her hometown hospital had turned into a haunted fortress. Mark rushed to her side, a flashlight in hand, his face tense. "We need to check on the patients." Their footsteps echoed down the hall as they approached the ward. The groans grew louder, rising and falling like a terrible symphony. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she turned a corner to see the patients, now out of their beds, staggering through the hallways, moving with a slow, eerie deliberation. They seemed to fix their glassy eyes on Sarah and Mark, extending their arms in a twisted, hungry gesture. Quick question for everyone watching. What would you do in Sarah's place? Comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Sarah took a step back, her heart pounding as the reality of their situation hit her. "Mark, we need to get out of here now." Mark nodded, and together they sprinted down the dimly lit hallway, their footsteps echoing as the infected followed, shuffling slowly yet relentlessly. They finally reached the nurses' station, where a small group of terrified staff members had gathered. Sarah, trying to steady her voice, explained the situation. The group quickly decided to barricade themselves in a storage room near the emergency exit, stacking equipment and shelves against the door. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as they listened to the infected pounding on the door, their groans echoing through the silence. Hours passed, each minute bringing a new wave of dread as they wondered if they'd survive the night. If you're as anxious as Sarah is right now, make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay updated with more gripping tales like this. Emily, a young intern who looked barely out of college, broke the silence with a whisper. "What's happening to them? This can't just be a virus, can it?" Sarah hesitated, glancing at the pale faces around her. "I don't know, Emily. Whatever this is, it's changing people, turning them into something else. And it's spreading faster than anything I've ever seen." Eventually, the sounds outside faded, leaving a tense silence hanging in the room. After what felt like hours, they decided they couldn't stay hidden forever. They needed to find a way out. Carefully, they dismantled the barricade and stepped back into the hallway, moving quietly to avoid drawing attention. But as they neared the exit, one of the infected, an elderly man Sarah had tended to just days ago, lunged from the shadows, clawing at her with a twisted, desperate hunger. Mark managed to pull Sarah away just in time, but the encounter left a heavy weight on her heart. This was someone she had cared for, someone who had trusted her, now reduced to a monstrous shell. Remember to hit the like button if you're gripped by this story. And leave a comment. What would you do if someone you cared about became like this? Once outside, they were met with a sight straight from a nightmare. The entire town lay in darkness, with only the faint glow of streetlights casting eerie pools of light across the empty streets. Shadows moved in the distance, former neighbors and friends, all aimlessly wandering as if caught in a horrible dream. The smell of decay hung heavy in the air, mixing with the crisp autumn breeze in a chilling reminder of the tragedy that had consumed their town. Mark gripped Sarah's hand, his voice steady but laced with fear. "We can't stay here, Sarah. If we're going to survive, we need to keep moving. Maybe there's hope if we reach the countryside." With a heavy heart, Sarah nodded. She couldn't bear to abandon the town she'd grown up in, but she knew Mark was right. They had no choice. Together with the other survivors, they began their perilous journey through the darkened streets, passing by familiar places now lost to horror: her childhood school, the old library, the playground that once echoed with laughter, now shrouded in silence. As they neared Sarah's home, a modest two-story house near the edge of town, they hoped to find shelter, even if only for a few hours. But inside, they found her younger brother, Ethan, clutching his arm in pain. A dark bite mark marred his skin, and Sarah's heart sank as she realized what it meant. She rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she gently touched his shoulder. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. He looked up at her with tear-filled eyes, regret etched into his face. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't want you to see me like this." The group stayed with him, doing their best to make him comfortable as his condition worsened. Sarah held his hand, memories of their childhood flooding her mind as she felt him slip away, one painful breath at a time. It was a quiet, heartbreaking moment, and as dawn broke, she knew she would carry this grief with her forever. And if this part touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional and intense stories. Comment below if you've ever had to make a tough decision like Sarah's. The next few days were a blur of survival. Sarah took charge, organizing the remaining survivors as they fortified the house and rationed their supplies. Each night, they kept watch in shifts, knowing the infected were always near, lurking in the shadows. Sleep became a rare luxury, haunted by nightmares and memories of those they had lost. One night, as Sarah sat by the window, watching the silent street below, Mark joined her, his expression weary but determined. "We can't stay here much longer. The infected are getting closer every day. We have to leave, find a safe place out of town." Sarah's heart ached at the thought of leaving her home. But she knew he was right. The town had become a place of horror, a shell of the life they once knew. It was time to move on. At dawn, they gathered their few remaining supplies and prepared to leave. The journey was perilous, with infected figures emerging from alleyways, drawn by the slightest sound. As they walked through the streets, passing by landmarks that once held happy memories, Sarah felt the weight of loss heavier than ever. Eventually, they found a temporary refuge in an old farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Here, the air was fresher, the silence less oppressive. But their relief was short-lived. Soon, the infected found them again, and one by one, they lost members of their group to the relentless horde. Each loss left a mark on Sarah's heart, a silent promise that she would remember them and keep fighting. In the end, only Sarah and Mark remained, standing on a hill overlooking the desolate town as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. They knew the battle for survival was far from over. But as they took one last look at their lost home, they held onto the faint hope that somewhere, a safer place awaited them. And that's where their story leaves us for now. If you want to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. And let us know in the comments, do you think Sarah and Mark will find safety, or is there more horror waiting for them on the road ahead? As they left the farmhouse behind, Mark tightened his grip on his makeshift weapon, a metal rod they'd scavenged from the ruins of a nearby shed. He could see the exhaustion etched into Sarah's face, yet her eyes held a fierce determination. She was fighting not just for her survival but for the memory of her loved ones, especially her brother Ethan. Their path was long and treacherous. Abandoned vehicles, broken signs, and deserted homes lined the roads, silent witnesses to the chaos that had swept through. Days blurred together, each one harder than the last as their supplies dwindled. They passed through empty neighborhoods, avoided lurking dangers, and always kept moving. But every sound seemed magnified in the eerie silence, every shadow a potential threat. One evening, as they reached the outskirts of a small, long-abandoned town, they decided to risk entering a dilapidated grocery store. Inside, the aisles were cluttered with fallen shelves and discarded goods. Mark began scouring for anything useful while Sarah kept watch, alert to any movement. As she peered through the shattered window, a flicker of light caught her eye, a distant flame moving slowly along the street outside. "Mark, someone's out there," she whispered, her voice a mix of hope and caution. They watched as the figure moved closer. Whoever it was, they were alone, carrying a lantern and moving cautiously. When the figure entered the store, Sarah and Mark froze, not wanting to startle the stranger. It was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and haunted eyes. He looked as if he'd been through his own nightmares. Seeing Sarah and Mark, he held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to harm you. Name's Jacob," he said, his voice rough yet sincere. They spoke cautiously, each trying to gauge the other's intentions. Jacob shared tales of his own survival, of losing his family to the infection and the endless search for a sanctuary. "I've heard rumors," he said, "of a place up north, beyond the mountains, a settlement of survivors." Sarah's heart raced. Could it be true? Could there really be a safe haven out there? What would you do? Would you trust Jacob and follow him to an unknown place? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story has you on the edge of your seat. Despite the risks, they decided to trust Jacob. Together, the three of them began the perilous journey north. The landscape grew harsher as they climbed into the mountains, their breaths visible in the cold air. The infected were fewer here, but the wilderness posed its own threats. Each night, they took turns keeping watch, huddled around a small fire that barely cut through the biting cold. During one particularly brutal snowstorm, they took refuge in an abandoned cabin. As they sat around the fire, Jacob told stories of his past life, memories of his family, of simpler times. His voice softened as he spoke, and Sarah felt a pang of longing for the life she'd lost. That night, as she drifted off to sleep, a sudden noise jolted her awake. Outside, shadows shifted in the darkness. She shook Mark and Jacob, her heart pounding as they readied their weapons. A group of infected had found them, drawn by the firelight. They broke through the flimsy cabin door, their eyes vacant yet hungry, their movements twisted and jerky. A fierce battle ensued, each of them fighting desperately for survival. Mark swung his rod, Jacob wielded a hunting knife, and Sarah struck with everything she had. When the last of the infected fell, they were left battered and exhausted, the cabin now a shattered ruin. If you've enjoyed this intense scene, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. And let us know in the comments, how would you survive an attack in such close quarters? Despite the danger, they pressed on, driven by the hope of reaching the rumored settlement. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger, each of them relying on the others to keep going. They faced countless hardships, but the thought of a sanctuary kept their spirits alive. Finally, one frosty morning, they caught sight of it, a fortified town nestled in a valley, guarded by high walls and watchtowers. The sight brought tears to Sarah's eyes. After everything they'd endured, could they finally be safe? As they approached, guards stepped forward, their faces wary but kind. They were welcomed inside, given warm clothes and food, simple gestures that felt like luxuries after their grueling journey. They learned that the settlement was run by a group of survivors who had banded together, creating a haven for those willing to work and protect one another. Sarah, Mark, and Jacob found a new family among the townspeople. They each took on roles within the community, working together to rebuild a semblance of normalcy. Though the world outside remained dangerous and uncertain, they had finally found a place where they could rest, heal, and hope. If you were moved by Sarah and Mark's journey, please hit subscribe and join us for more stories of resilience and hope in the face of darkness. Sarah's story doesn't end here. She and the others continue to build a life, remembering those they lost and honoring their memories by forging a new future. They survived not just through strength, but through unity, trust, and a refusal to give up. Would you like the story to continue beyond their arrival at the settlement? There's always room for more adventures and challenges. Let me know, and I can dive even deeper into their lives in this world of survival. As the days turned into weeks within the settlement, Sarah, Mark, and Jacob began to settle into their new lives. The community was diverse, filled with individuals from all walks of life, former teachers, doctors, engineers, and even artists. They each had stories of loss, just like Sarah's, but the shared experience brought a sense of camaraderie that was both comforting and inspiring. Sarah found herself drawn to the group responsible for food production, where they cultivated crops in makeshift greenhouses and tended to small livestock. With her background in gardening before the outbreak, she quickly became an asset to the team, her hands eager to work the soil. It was there that she met Lydia, a spirited woman with a penchant for storytelling and a deep understanding of nature. Their friendship blossomed as they shared laughter and stories over their work. Meanwhile, Mark joined the security team, where he trained under David, a former police officer. Mark learned the intricacies of defending the settlement, strategies for watching the perimeter, identifying potential threats, and handling weapons with precision. He thrived in this role, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Every day, he felt more confident in his abilities and more determined to protect those he cared about. Jacob, on the other hand, gravitated toward the community's medical team. His past experiences caring for others during the chaos had left him with valuable skills. He quickly became an integral part of the team, learning from the town's doctor, a kind-hearted woman named Dr. Mills. He spent hours studying and assisting with treatments, from minor injuries to illnesses that plagued the community. As they established their new routines, how would you contribute to a community like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of survival and community. Life was not without its challenges, however. The settlement faced constant threats from both the infected and desperate raiders looking to take advantage of their hard-earned resources. The community had set up watchtowers and patrols, but tensions ran high, and every new face brought a wave of anxiety. One evening, during a town meeting, the community gathered to discuss increasing patrols after a recent skirmish with a group of raiders. Mark stood among the crowd, his heart pounding as he listened to the murmurs of fear. "We need to be proactive," he urged, stepping forward. "We can't just wait for them to come to us. We should increase our scouting missions and create a more extensive defense plan." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement while others expressed their doubts. Sarah watched Mark, her heart swelling with pride. He had grown into a leader, someone others looked to for guidance. Lydia stepped in, her voice calm and confident. "We can't allow fear to dictate our actions. We need to be united. If we work together, we can fortify our defenses and protect our home." Her words resonated with the townspeople, sparking a renewed sense of hope. After hours of discussions, they devised a plan for the upcoming weeks. Mark would lead a team to reinforce the town's defenses while others worked on scouting missions to gather intelligence on the raider groups. What would you do in such a situation? Would you take charge or follow someone else's lead? Let us know in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe for more thrilling moments from Sarah and Mark's journey. The next day, as Mark prepared to leave with his team, Sarah couldn't shake her worry. "Be careful out there," she said, her voice laced with concern. "We've come too far to lose anyone now." Mark gave her a reassuring smile. "I'll be back before you know it. Just hold the fort down here, okay?" As they set out, Sarah watched them disappear into the trees, her heart heavy with uncertainty. Over the next few days, life in the settlement continued, but a palpable tension lingered in the air. The community banded together, reinforcing walls and preparing for any potential conflict. Yet, Sarah felt restless, her instincts telling her that something was brewing outside their walls. If you feel like Sarah and want to take action, hit that subscribe button. What do you think she should do next? Should she venture out to find Mark? Comment below. One night, unable to shake the feeling of dread, Sarah confided in Lydia. "I can't just sit here and wait. I need to know what's happening out there," she admitted, her eyes filled with determination. Lydia considered this for a moment. "You might not be wrong, but you shouldn't go alone. If you're going to find Mark, you need backup." Together, they approached Jacob, who was tending to some supplies in the medical tent. "We're thinking of going out to check on Mark and the others," Sarah said. "Ewan?" Jacob looked up, concern etched on his face. "It's risky, but I understand why you'd want to." If we're going, we need to be smart about it. We can't afford to attract attention. With a plan in mind, they gathered supplies, extra weapons, medical kits, and food, and prepared to leave under the cover of darkness. As they slipped out of the settlement, Sarah's heart raced, a mix of fear and anticipation coursing through her veins. Do you think they'll find Mark and the others safely? The forest was quiet, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the distant howl of the wind. They moved swiftly, using the moonlight to navigate. As they approached the last known location of Mark and his team, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, something felt wrong. Suddenly, they heard voices ahead. Sarah gestured for silence, and they crouched behind a cluster of bushes. Peering through, they could see Mark's group, outnumbered and surrounded by a larger band of raiders. "Let's move in closer," Sarah whispered, her heart racing. "We can't just stand by." Jacob shook his head. "No, we need a distraction first. We can't go in without a plan." Lydia nodded, already scanning the area for anything they could use. "I have an idea. If we create a diversion, we might be able to draw them away." As they discussed their plan, they spotted a small pile of rocks and branches nearby. They could set a small fire to create a distraction while they moved in to help Mark. What would you do? Would you create a diversion or come up with a different strategy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. With a plan in place, they lit the fire and quickly retreated to a safe distance. The flames flickered and crackled, sending up plumes of smoke. The raiders, drawn by the sudden noise, began to shift their attention away from Mark and his group. "Now," Sarah urged, leading the way as they sprinted toward Mark, adrenaline pumping through her veins. As they closed in, Mark noticed them and shouted, "Sarah? Lydia?" Jacob. Relief flooded his face, but there was no time for greetings. With the element of surprise on their side, the three newcomers joined the fight, taking on the raiders with a fierce determination. Together, they fought with everything they had, refusing to back down. How do you think the battle will end? Are they going to emerge victorious? After a fierce struggle, they managed to push back the raiders, forcing them to retreat. The victory felt bittersweet, though, as they caught their breath and took stock of their injuries. Mark looked at Sarah, gratitude shining in his eyes. "You came for me," he said, a mix of awe and relief. "Of course I did," Sarah replied, her heart swelling with pride. "We're in this together." As they made their way back to the settlement, their bond had deepened even further. They had fought together, survived together, and now, they would heal together. Upon their return, the community welcomed them with open arms, relief washing over the townspeople as they saw their loved ones safe. Yet, the experience had changed them all. They were reminded of the dangers lurking beyond their walls and the importance of staying vigilant. What do you think will happen next in their lives? Will they continue to face new challenges, or will they find a moment of peace? Let us know your predictions in the comments. As life in the settlement continued, Sarah, Mark, and Jacob began to focus on rebuilding their lives. Together, they participated in community events, sharing meals, storytelling, and even music. The scars of their past remained, but they found solace in the friendships they had formed. However, the outside world was still fraught with danger. They continued to hear reports of raider groups roaming nearby, prompting discussions about fortifying the settlement further. Mark, eager to contribute, volunteered to lead a new defense initiative, working closely with David and the security team to train everyone in self-defense and tactics. Meanwhile, Sarah and Lydia organized workshops to teach the community essential survival skills. They focused on gardening, foraging, and food preservation. Their workshops became a gathering place, fostering unity and resilience among the community members. People shared stories of their pasts while learning how to grow their own food, creating a sense of hope for the future. As time passed, the settlement transformed into a thriving community, stronger than ever. The bonds forged in the fires of conflict held them together. Sarah often reflected on how far they had come, from the chaotic days of the outbreak to this newfound sense of belonging. One afternoon, while tending to her garden, Sarah noticed Mark standing nearby, his gaze distant. "What's on your mind?" she asked, wiping dirt from her hands and looking up at him. Mark sighed, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I've been thinking about the future, about what happens if the raiders come back. We can't live in fear forever." Sarah nodded, understanding his concern. "We've built something beautiful here, but we need to be ready for anything. Perhaps we can fortify the perimeter more, install watchtowers, or even establish trade routes with other settlements." "That's a great idea," Mark replied, a spark of determination igniting in his eyes. "We can work together with the community to create a safer environment for everyone." How would you feel about living in such a community? Would you want to contribute? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button. As they discussed their plans, Jacob joined them, a grin on his face. "I've been thinking the same thing. We need to ensure that our people feel secure and supported. Let's host a town hall meeting to discuss these ideas and get everyone's input." That evening, the trio organized the meeting, gathering everyone in the central square. Under the stars, with torches flickering, the community came together once more. Sarah, Mark, and Jacob presented their ideas, igniting a passionate discussion among the townsfolk. "We've survived the worst together," Sarah said, her voice strong. "But to thrive, we need to adapt and prepare. We can build watchtowers, set up training sessions, and establish trade with neighboring communities." The townspeople responded with enthusiasm, offering suggestions and volunteering for different tasks. The sense of unity and purpose that night was palpable. They were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the weeks turned into months, the settlement fortified its defenses, expanded its food sources, and even established trade with other nearby settlements. They became known not just for their resilience but also for their generosity and willingness to help others. Sarah, Mark, and Jacob grew into respected leaders within the community, always pushing for progress and improvement. But just as they began to settle into this rhythm, a new challenge emerged. Rumors spread of a large raider group assembling nearby, one that had been raiding settlements for supplies and captives. The community faced its most significant threat yet. During an emergency meeting, tension hung in the air as Sarah, Mark, and Jacob presented the information. "We need a solid plan," Mark urged. "We can't let fear divide us. We need to unite and prepare for whatever comes our way." Dr. Mills stood up, her voice steady. "We should strengthen our defenses and prepare everyone for what may come. Training everyone to fight is essential, but so is keeping our people safe." That night, they trained tirelessly. The community worked together, setting up mock drills and preparing weapons. Sarah led the women in self-defense classes while Mark trained the men in combat tactics. Jacob helped reinforce the medical tent, ensuring they were prepared for injuries during a potential raid. After days of preparation, the moment of truth arrived. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows, the watchman reported sighting the raider group approaching. The air buzzed with tension as everyone took their positions. The raiders stormed the settlement, but Sarah and the community were ready. A fierce battle ensued, the clash of weapons and cries of determination echoing through the night. Sarah fought alongside Mark and Jacob, defending their home with every ounce of strength they had. The community's preparation paid off as they fought back with unexpected ferocity. United, they pushed the raiders back, refusing to yield. After hours of fighting, the raiders finally retreated, their numbers dwindling against the determined defenders. Breathing heavily, Sarah looked around at her friends and neighbors, their faces smeared with dirt and sweat but shining with victory. They had survived the worst together once again. In the aftermath, as the community regrouped and assessed their losses, they realized that they had not only defended their home but also strengthened their bonds. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger than ever. As life began to return to normal, the community took time to heal and celebrate their victory. They organized a festival to honor their resilience and unity, turning a day of battle into a day of joy and remembrance. Sarah, Mark, and Jacob watched as their friends danced and laughed, a sense of pride swelling within them. That night, as the stars twinkled above, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since the outbreak. They had built a community rooted in support and love, overcoming unimaginable obstacles. "Look how far we've come," Mark said, wrapping his arm around Sarah. We turned our pain into strength. And we'll keep moving forward, Jacob added, raising his cup in a toast. To our community, our home, and our future. Cheers erupted as everyone joined in the toast, their spirits high. They had not just survived, they had thrived. In that moment, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. They had faced their fears and emerged victorious, but the journey was far from over. They would continue to grow, adapt, and face whatever challenges the world threw their way. Together, they would carve out a future filled with hope. This is the end of Sarah, Mark, and Jacob's current journey, but what do you think their future holds? Would you like to hear more about their adventures? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for the next thrilling saga.